तव करुणानु गीत प्रभुजी गाइश हूँ सदाकाल।
तव करुणानु गीत प्रभुजी गाइश हूँ सदाकाल।
Welcome, dear friends, to the second day of our NET Ignatian Retreat 2020. Today, for our prayer, we shall reflect upon what Saint Ignatius of Loyola calls the principle and foundation. One important thing that we must do in every retreat that we make is a general examination of conscience, a thorough examination of our lives. And to help us enter into a general examination of conscience, St. Ignatius proposes this principle and foundation. In the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 9, we have the following incident. Our first parents, Adam and Eve, after they disobeyed God, God comes looking for them. And then God asks a very important question. And that is, where are you? Where are you? Scriptural scholars would tell us that this question is not a geographical question. In other words, God is not asking Adam and Eve, in which part of the garden are you hiding yourself? Not a geographical question. It is a spiritual question. What does that mean? God is asking Adam and Eve, where are you spiritually at this moment of your life? God is reminding Adam and Eve that we had begun a beautiful journey together. And during that journey, we experienced a sense of tranquility, a sense of harmony, a sense of peace. But where are you now at this moment of your life? God is asking Adam and Eve to introspect and reflect on their life. Similarly, my dear friends, as we begin this retreat, as we go deeper into this retreat, the Lord is asking the same question to us. Where are you at this moment of your life? Where are you in terms of your relationship with me? Where are you in terms of your relationship with your brothers and sisters? Where are you in terms of your relationship with yourself? And this question will help us to enter more meaningfully into this general examination of conscience. And so, my dear friends, please take some time reflecting on this question, trying to answer this question. And to help us to go deeper into general examination of conscience, as I mentioned in the beginning, Saint Ignatius of Loyola proposes this consideration called the principle and foundation. Before I start explaining to you what is principle and foundation, I want to introduce to you another key expression, and this is disordered affection or inordinate attachment. Disordered affection or inordinate attachment. St. Ignatius, in the spiritual exercises, envisages that all who make this retreat are able to identify the disordered affections or inordinate attachments in his or her life, and then in the process of this retreat one is able to get rid of all these disordered affections and attachments so that one can truly dispose oneself to seek the will of God. Now, how do we understand inordinate attachment? How do we understand disordered affection? All of us have our own attachments. You are attached to your husband. You are attached to your wife. You are attached to your children. Can that be called inordinate attachment? No. You have your own affections towards your family members. Can that be called disordered affection? No. If so, what is disordered affection? What is inordinate attachment? Let us go now to understand that to the principle and foundation. The first step of the principle and foundation, St. Ignatius of Loyola explains to us the purpose of our life, the goal of our life. What is the purpose or the goal of our life? St. Ignatius says, the goal of our life is to live with God forever. The goal of our life is to live with God forever. Forever. God who loves us. God who gave us life. So the goal of our life, my dear friends, is to live with God. To love and serve God. To glorify God. That is the ultimate goal of our life. Now, if that is the ultimate goal of our life, the next thing St. Ignatius proposes is, we have so many things with us. God has created so many things. What is the purpose of all that? What is the purpose behind all these gifts that we have? And this is where St. Ignatius would say that all the things in this world, are gifts to us. All the things that we have are gifts given to us by God, presented to us by God, so that in and through these gifts we can know God, and then we can also make a return of love. So all the gifts that we have, all that God has created on the face of the earth, will help us understand God's love for each one of us, and in and through these gifts we are able to make a return of love to God. So what does that mean, my dear friends? Everything in this world, my family, my job, the money that I have, the gadgets that I have, my priesthood, my religious life, my parish, etc., etc. Everything is a gift from God, and we are supposed to use these gifts. Now, how are we supposed to use these gifts? As I mentioned, these gifts remind us of God's love, and we are supposed to use these gifts. And how are we supposed to use these gifts? Here St. Ignatius would say, we are supposed to use all these gifts given to us by God insofar as they help us to fulfill the primary purpose of our life. Let me repeat that. We are supposed to use all the gifts that we have insofar as they help us to fulfill the ultimate purpose of our life. The key word in this statement is insofar as. In Latin we have an expression tantum kuvantum. In Gujarati we can say jetlu tetlu, jitna utna. We are supposed to use whatever God has given to us insofar as they help us to become loving persons, insofar as it helps us to give ultimate priority to God, insofar as it helps us to love God with all our heart and with all our mind. So all these things that we have should be used, but they must never become the center of our lives. These things that God has created on the face of the earth should never become the center of our life. These things should never lead us to displace God. When these things become the center of our life, when these things make us to displace God, that will hinder our spiritual growth. To some extent, we can even say that will result in idol worship. We know that one of the major sins of the people of Israel was idol worship. And how do we understand idol worship in this context? Idol worship is not something about going after other gods. If God is not the center of your life, if anything else in your life has become the center of your life, then you are into some form of idol worship. And when that happens, we will be spiritually stagnated. We will be spiritually fixated. So once again, let us try to understand what is disordered affection, what is inordinate affection. Anything that does not help me to fulfill the ultimate purpose of my life, anything that does not allow me to make God the ultimate priority in my life, that can be called a disordered affection, that can be called an inordinate attachment. It could be a place, it could be a person, it could be an event, anything that does not help us to fulfill the ultimate purpose of our life, anything that does not allow us to make God the ultimate priority of our life is a disordered affection, is an inordinate attachment. And so today, on the second day of the retreat, we ask ourselves, is there anything in my life? Is there anything in my life at this moment of my life which does not allow me to make God the center of my life? I repeat, is there anything at this juncture of my life that displaces God, that does not allow me to make the ultimate priority of my life? In fact, this will also go against the first commandment. The first commandment says, you are supposed to love your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. If anything in your life that does not help you, that does not enable you to love God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul, then you are into idol worship, then there are disordered affections or inordinate attachment in your life. One way of understanding this is by making a distinction between means and end. A distinction between means and end. Anything that we have, everything that we have, everything God has created is only a means for us to fulfill the ultimate end, the ultimate purpose of our life. Perhaps you are familiar with this story. Once, one young boy and a young girl, against the will of their parents, decided to get married. And it so happened that soon after the marriage, this boy who was working in an IT company was sent to the US for 1 year. And he had no permission to take his wife along with him. It was very difficult for him to decide. But finally he and his wife decided the following. He will go to the US, but from the US, every day he will write a letter. Every day he will write a letter to his wife. And he went to the US, and as per his promise, every day he would write a letter, and the postman would bring that letter to his wife. The wife, when she reads that letter, she will obviously be very happy. And finally, what happened? At the end of the year, when this man came back from the US, he found that his wife had fallen in love with the postman. What happened? She felt that this postman is so good, so generous, so understanding. She forgot the fact that he was only bringing the letter that was sent by her husband. The letter was not written by him. When means become the end of our lives, then that results in inordinate attachment, that results in disordered affection. Another example. What happened to Abraham, our father in faith? Generally, when we ask this question, why God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, the answer that is traditionally given is to test the faith of Abraham. I think there is something more to it. We know that for many years, Abraham and Sarah did not have a son. After so many years of waiting, finally God blesses Sarah and Abraham with a son, Isaac. And then what happened? Once Isaac came into his life, Isaac gradually became the center of his life. We see this happening in day-to-day life. After so many years of marriage, if a couple does not have a child, they will pray, they will go for any kind of novenas and retreats. But finally, when they receive the gift of a child, there is a possibility that that child becomes the center of their life and not God. Means becoming the end of our life. And God says to Abraham, sacrifice Isaac. Sacrifice Isaac. My dear friends, during this retreat, as we enter into this general examination of conscience, God is telling us, sacrifice all the Isaacs that you have. Sacrifice all the disordered affections that you have. Sacrifice all the inordinate attachments in your life which are not allowing you to make God the center of your life. In the context of the principle and foundation, another term that we need to understand is a term called indifference. Now, generally we understand the word indifference differently in English language. But Ignatius, when he introduces this term indifference, or when we learn this term indifference in the context of the spiritual exercises, it has a different meaning. Indifference is basically a state of interior freedom, a sense of interior freedom that we experience. Interior freedom to seek the will of God in our life, and interior freedom to fulfill God's will in our life. And so St. Ignatius would say, in our day-to-day life, whether we experience good health or sickness, life or death, success or failure, I am indifferent. Means what? I choose anything, death or life, anything that gives glory to God. I choose that which will give glory to God. We can give glory to God through our lives. We can give glory to God through our death. We can give glory to God through the success that we have. We can also give glory to God through our sickness. This is how we must try to understand the word indifference. So we must be ready to accept anything that God offers us. What is to be kept in mind is, in terms of our choice, we choose that which will give glory to God. So as I mentioned, we can give glory to God in good times and in so-called bad times. So this sort of indifference is to be cultivated. And our retreat will gradually help you to cultivate this gift called indifference. And that will help us to grow in interior freedom. And without some sense of interior freedom, we will not be able to seek God's will in our day-to-day life. In fact, one of the purposes of an Ignatian retreat is to grow in interior freedom. We have interior freedom so that we can love God, serve God with all our heart, with all our mind, and with all our soul in every situation of our life. So in general, we can say, when we have inordinate attachments or disordered affections, we are not interiorly free. We are not practicing indifference. And so, my dear friends, ultimately, this freedom from disordered affections, this freedom from inordinate attachments, this attitude of indifference, this state of interior freedom will truly help us to seek the will of God at every moment of our life. At this moment of your life, you may be going through a terrible crisis. You may be going through a terrible tragedy in your life. We know that at this moment of history, the whole world is disturbed by coronavirus. In all these situations, am I interiorly free to seek God's will? So, my dear friends, our only desire, our only choice in our life is to give glory to God, to choose anything that will help us to love God, to serve God, and to glorify God. So, insofar as we are not able to do that, that means that we are not interiorly free. Let's take the example of Mother Mary. Yesterday I spoke to you about the scene of Annunciation. Mary is surrendering her will. At the end of that Annunciation scene, Mary is able to say, "Let it be done to me according to your will," because she was interiorly free. She did not have disordered affections. She did not have inordinate attachment. So that is the kind of state that we must reach in the context or in this process of retreat, interior freedom. Yesterday also I spoke to you about Zacchaeus. I spoke about Zacchaeus in the context of the inner disposition that we must have in the beginning of the retreat. Let us go a bit further. We know that Zacchaeus was attached to money, but he was able to give up his attachment to money. When did that happen? That happened when he had a personal encounter with Jesus. We said yesterday, one of the fundamental objectives of any retreat is to have a deeper personal encounter with Jesus. So when we have a deeper and personal encounter with Jesus, that will automatically help us to give up, to give away all the other disordered affections or inordinate attachments that we have. Take the example of St. Paul. Again, I mentioned that. We know that he was so attached to the Mosaic law. He was so attached to the Mosaic tradition. But once he had a personal encounter with Jesus, all that becomes secondary. The law becomes secondary, the tradition becomes secondary. And so the crucial thing is, how do we get rid of this inordinate attachment? Have a personal encounter with Jesus, and that will help us to get rid of all these disordered affections that we have. And so we ask, my dear friends, at this moment of our life, what is the quality of indifference that is followed by me at this moment of my life? What is the quality of indifference that I follow in my day-to-day life? Am I truly, interiorly free to seek and fulfill God's will in my life? Am I ready to surrender my life at every moment of our life? What is the quality of surrender that is practiced by me, followed by me at this moment of our life? When do we generally surrender? When do we generally surrender our lives? When we have no other option, isn't it? Take the example of a cat and a rat. Imagine in a closed room there is a cat and there is a rat. And the cat is chasing the rat and the rat is running around. And finally, the cat will corner the rat. And what will the rat say to the cat? I surrender. If it is your will, allow me to go. Or if it is your will, then eat me. But that surrender happens when? Not because the rat is interiorly free, when it has no other option. Generally in our lives, that is the kind of surrender that we try to practice. But that is not the understanding of surrender, at least in Christian perspective. So my dear friends, once again let me pose a few more questions for your prayer and reflection. We ask ourselves, what are the disordered affections that I have? What are the inordinate attachments that I have? What is the quality of indifference that I practice in my day-to-day life? When do I generally surrender my life to God? And so on. We also ask ourselves, at this moment of my life, how much of interior freedom that I experience so that I can truly seek God's will. Having said that, let me conclude this sharing by sharing with you an important, very nice quotation taken from Blessed Rupert. He says, Lord, as you will, so let it be for me. And as you will, so will I walk that road. Help me only to know your will. Lord, whenever you will, then is the time. And whenever you will, then I am ready, today and always. Lord, whatever you will, that I accept. And whatever you will is gain for me. Enough that I belong to you. Lord, because you will it, it is good. And because you will it, I have courage. My heart rests safely in your hands. Amen.
तव करुणानु गीत प्रभु जी गाइश हूँ सदा का
तव करुणा गीत प्रभु जी गाइश हूँ सदा का अविचल तारा प्रेम निगाथा विचल तारा प्रेम निगाथा
युग युग हूँ कहना तव करुणानु गीत प्रभु